Hello, it's so nice to meet you. I'm so happy to be interviewing with you today. Why do I want to be a doctor? Right. We're just getting right down to it, aren't we? Well, it's a funny story actually. Yikes. I'd say that's pretty much every pre-med's worst interview nightmare. But that is not going to happen to you. You know why? Because you have me to help you prepare. I know a ton of aspects of the application have changed significantly this year because of COVID-19, and interviews are definitely going to look different than maybe they have in the past. But I want you to be prepared for whatever comes your way. So today, we're gonna be talking about each of the potential components of the interview process for 2020 and how to prepare for them. This will be the time to take notes. Okay, so first and foremost, we're just gonna get it out of the way. VITA. What is it? Okay, so VITA is actually a new addition to the interview process. It was added this year. Nobody else has ever done it before, no pressure. And it's basically going to serve as part one of the interview process this year. At the time that I'm filming this video, about 40 schools in the US are gonna be using this component, including Baylor, Stanford, Michigan, lots of others. So even though maybe not every school you're applying to will be using it, odds are that at least one school you're interested in will probably require it. So you're gonna wanna know what you're getting into. First of all, I just wanna say this is not the same thing as a Skype interview because you're not actually talking to anyone on the other side of the screen. You're basically pre-recording a few really general interview questions that will be uploaded as part of your overall application file and that any school that's using VITA can access. So basically the way this is gonna work is you'll send in your application, the schools will look it over. And then if at least one of the participating medical schools wants you to complete the VITA, you'll get an email invitation with all the information on how to do that. All right, so let's say you get an invite. You'll open up your computer, you'll turn on your webcam, and you will be presented with a question prompt. You will have 1 minute to read over the question and figure out an idea of what you wanna say, and you'll have 3 minutes to respond. And you're gonna get 6 of these questions total, coming from 3 different possible categories. Now, when I first read about this, I'll be honest, the concept of a pre-recorded interview response without any sort of personal interaction sounded very overwhelming. But the good news is that the AAMC has been really transparent about the types of questions that you can expect in the VITA. So let's talk about the 3 different categories. Number 1 is going to be something along the lines of, why are you interested in the medical field? So first off, I just want to remind you that this is a 3-minute time limit, which means you can't possibly go over every single thing you did as a pre-med student, okay? You have to stick to the highlights. And secondly, this is very important. Your response should not be something that's applicable to other careers. So I'll show you what I mean. So let's say I had this question and I responded with something along the lines of, I really like helping people, or I want to invest in my community. Great sentiments, I love it. However, those ideas could apply to a lot of different careers. You can help people by being a lawyer, by being a firefighter, or a social worker, lots of different jobs help people. So you want to make this response really specific to medicine. So pick experiences or interests that directly tie into medicine specifically. All right, category number 2. This is gonna be some sort of behavioral situation. So the example that they gave was, tell us about a time you had a conflict with someone and how did you resolve it? I wanna make sure you pick a scenario that you actively and effectively solved. So I'll tell you what I mean by that. First of all, active. Don't pick a problem that just kind of went away on its own or that somebody else was really the main person solving. Pick a problem that you were personally invested in and that you were the one who solved, or you were a part of the resolution. And then on the flip side, make sure it actually came to a satisfying resolution, because there is nothing more anticlimactic than hearing someone tell a story about a problem that didn't get solved. Also, make sure you clarify what you learned or what your takeaway was from this story. Everything I have ever researched about this process has led me to believe that medical schools really love hearing about perspective shifts from their applicants. So a really good framework to use, whether it's an interview response or an essay question, is, I used to think this, then this happened, and now I think this. The last category is going to be some sort of hypothetical situation. So the example they gave was, imagine you're working on a group project and one of your teammates isn't pulling their weight. How would you handle that situation? I feel like these sort of pseudo-ethical scenario type questions can be a little bit trickier to answer than your more generic application questions, at least in my opinion. So my advice here would be definitely relate it to a particular situation that's happened in your life. So just like the second category, bring it back to like a tangible thing that actually happened to you that you can work with a little bit easier, rather than trying to take this sort of like high level philosophical or analytical approach, especially with that example question. I mean, like, we've all had a few years of school at this point. We've probably worked on a team before. Like, we should be able to come up with something that relates to that. The timeline to get your invitation and complete the VITA started in July 2020, but don't worry because it's gonna go all the way to April 2021. All right, so we've got part 1 of the interview process. Now, let's talk about part 2. This is the big question mark. Like I said, the AAMC really hasn't given us a definitive answer on what this part is gonna look like. Are they gonna be Skype interviews? Are they gonna be regular old in-person interviews? Is it gonna be some sort of weird hybrid of the two? I have no idea what that would look like, but I mean, who knows? So first off, I wanna give you a few general tips on how to film your virtual interviews if that's something they decide to do. Okay, number 1. Good lighting. So I'm sitting in front of a ginormous window right now, and I have a box light shining on me from the other angle. So even if you don't have one of those, grab a lamp from somewhere in the house and kind of like tilt it towards yourself. Make sure your face is very well lit. Number 2, find a plain background. The spot I am currently filming in would be a perfect example of what not to do. Try to find like a blank wall that you can film in front of where nothing behind you is gonna be distracting. Lastly, pick out a full outfit. Now don't get me wrong, I definitely have ascribed to the whole half and half sort of deal that's become very popular in this post-COVID world, you know, business on top and sweatpants on the bottom. But in this particular case, you don't want to have to worry about an admissions committee accidentally seeing like the top part of your PJs. So just wear what you would actually wear in an interview. Oh, I thought of another one. This one's really important. Make sure you do a screen test before your interviews. Put on the outfit you're gonna wear, sit in front of the background you're gonna use, get all the lights set up, and make sure everything looks great. And not only that, but kind of practice a few responses and watch yourself as you're answering them, because you may find that you do some things that are a little bit distracting or a little bit like off-putting. Now before we move on, I just want to give a huge disclaimer for the rest of this video that I am not going to be talking about specific questions from any of the interviews that I went on. That is so the AAMC doesn't try to strike down this video. Okay, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's talk about general strategies for responding to interview questions. I think the biggest thing that surprised me about my interviews was honestly the fact that I was able to take the lead a lot more than I thought I was going to. So when I was prepping for my interviews, I was trying to figure out like what types of questions they were gonna be asking so I could come up with like the perfectly articulated answer. But really when I got in there, I found that they didn't really seem to be looking for one type of answer to their questions. And in fact, a lot of the questions they were asking were general enough that I could pretty much take them in any direction that I wanted to. So, rather than just going online to the Princeton Review's lists of potential interview questions, I would say that the best way to prep for these interviews is to make a list of topics ahead of time that you want to figure out a way to work into the conversation. These should definitely be the activities you've done over the years that you're most passionate about, things that you're really excited to talk about, and you could just talk and talk and talk for however long that you need to. And please, I'm begging you, do not just reiterate your entire work and activities section during your interview, even if it's a closed file. And what that means is that the person who's interviewing you hasn't actually seen your application yet, or they've only seen parts of it. And they do that sometimes to try and make the interviews as unbiased as possible, but some people hear that and they think, oh no, I need to get them up to speed on all of the things that I've done in the last 4 years. That is the wrong move, okay? Don't do that. And one last thing for your interviews, I would definitely recommend asking your interviewers questions either about themselves or about the school you're applying to. I wouldn't stress too much about what those specific questions are. And I know, we've all heard those stories about interviewers who talk about students that ask the perfect question at the end of their interview. And that's a lot of pressure for the rest of us to try and come up with that magical question. But in reality, or at least in my opinion, I think the purpose of asking your interviewer questions is not so much to impress them as it is to just break the ice. Like, it's oddly unnerving to be talking about all these really personal things to somebody that you've never met before, especially when you know that that person is playing a role in whether or not you get into medical school. So if you have the opportunity, I would definitely take advantage of asking your interviewer some questions. That could be at the very end of your interview, in which case you just kind of leave things on a positive note with your interviewer. Or if it happens earlier on, you can just build a stronger rapport with each other. Okay, last topic. So I'll be honest, and again, personal opinion and whatnot, I'm skeptical as to whether or not there will be in-person interviews this year. It's just a feeling, I could be wrong. But even if there are, they probably won't look exactly like they have in the past. So let me get you up to speed on what they usually look like. This is not just a come in for an hour interview and then go home. Oh no. So typically an interview is an all-day sort of thing. You get there in the morning and you leave late afternoon, early evening. First, you'll probably have some presentations from maybe the dean of students or the financial aid office. Then at some point, they'll usually feed you, since again, it's an all-day thing. Then you're gonna go on a tour of the campus and maybe a tour of the hospitals where the school teaches at. And then you will get to your interviews. And there could be more than one. It could be 2 interviews. You could be meeting with multiple people in the same interview. Who knows? It depends on the school. But basically, you need to be prepared for a whole day's extravaganza. Therefore, I have come up with a handy-dandy packing list for you. First off, an umbrella. Oh my goodness. Literally 2 of my interviews fell on days where it was storming so bad. And of course, you're walking all over campus. And you're in business clothes. And a lot of times, the tour comes before the interview. So basically, you just want to try to stay as dry as possible. And that kind of leads into my second point, which is to bring a pair of sneakers. That probably seems really strange to like bring casual shoes to an interview, but actually a lot of schools are totally cool with it. Actually, some of them even expect you to. Because I mean, think about it. Everyone's in either loafers or heels or ballet shoes, none of which are comfortable and none of which are suited for walking half a mile around campus in. And a lot of times the day will actually be structured to give you time specifically to change before and after the tour, so don't worry about it, just bring a spare change of shoes. Speaking of walking around a lot, definitely bring a water bottle as well. Usually they'll have refreshments for you throughout the day, but you can't guarantee you'll be able to get water exactly when you need to, especially if it's like right before your interview starts. So I prefer to just keep a water bottle with me. I would also advise you fill it up at home because of COVID, but that's a personal preference. Next thing, cash for parking. I could be misremembering, but I don't think any of my interviews actually reimbursed parking. And I mean, it's like university parking, so you know. And a lot of times there are these modern machines that take debit cards, but just in case, you do not want to be stuck in the parking lot after a long day of interviews. So just bring a few dollars in cash just in case. My final recommendation would be to bring a backpack or a large purse to carry all this stuff in. I know it probably sounds a little bit extra to bring a backpack to a med school interview, but a lot of times they're anticipating that you're going to do that, so they usually have a designated space for you to keep it where you can access it during the day, so don't worry about that. All right, that's all I can think of at the moment. I hope this video was helpful to you. As I said before, things are still kind of up in the air, but hopefully these tips will be applicable to any of the potentially hybrid weird scenarios we might see over the next few months. I know interviews can be really stressful, especially when you don't know what to expect, but in my experience, I found that they're never as bad as you think they're gonna be. And actually, once you get past the first few minutes of kind of like awkward tension, they're kind of weirdly enjoyable. As always, the comments are totally open for any questions you have. I want to be as helpful to you as possible. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time.